We'll now take this work in attribution theory a bit further and move into Carol Dweck's focus on mindset. So let's see if we can take this model a little bit further. We talked about attribution theory using this simpler model on just 2 dimensions, the internal, external, and controllable, uncontrollable. And here's a new scenario. Manuelita just received back a test with a grade of F. How might she explain this to herself? And so she might make an internal uncontrollable attribution. I'm just so stupid. Or perhaps she would make an internal controllable attribution. I stayed out too late last night and I didn't study. She could make an external uncontrollable attribution. She could say something like, this test was just too hard. Or she could make an external controllable attribution. Maybe she would say, this teacher doesn't like me, but maybe she'll have the idea that if she, butters up the teacher a little bit, then the teacher will like her. So maybe that is controllable from her perspective. Let's concentrate for these next slides on the difference between these 2 attributions, the internal uncontrollable and the internal controllable. So let's imagine that we understand this pattern for attributions, that if an event happens, we make an attribution or an explanation for why it happened, and that leads us to behave in a certain way in the future. So for example, imagine if you get an A on the test. And whenever you get an A, which happens often for you, you say, I worked hard. What are you going to do in the future? If you want to continue getting A's, you're going to work hard again. That is an internal controllable attribution, a very healthy sort of attribution. Now let's imagine, again, that you ace the test and your attribution is, I got lucky. The best you can do in the future is you can hope to get lucky again. This is an external uncontrollable attribution. There's nothing you can do. Think about that locus of control. It's out of your control. What if you ace the test and your attribution tends to be, I'm smart. That's why I aced this test. Just comes easy to me. I've got it. What's your behavior in the future? You're going to expect your smartness to pay off again. You're going to just expect to do well again because you're smart. And all of this works just great for a while. So let's imagine that this is your attribution habit. You ace the test, you say, I'm smart, you expect to do well again, and maybe you do in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 8th grade. You keep having this happen. You ace the test, you say, I'm smart, you expect to do well again, you're not working very hard, it's just coming to you. And it happens again and again and again, and this is your attribution habit. And you keep doing it. And then all of a sudden, you get to college. The tasks are much harder. Or maybe you graduate 8th grade and get to high school. But whatever it is that happened, now there's a really tough task and things have gotten harder, and boom, you fail the test. If your attribution habit in the past, whenever you ace the test, has been to tell yourself that you're smart and you've never worked very hard, what happens when you fail the test? The only reasonable attribution is, I guess I'm not smart enough. This is embarrassing. And what's your behavior? You could hide the test from your parents and friends. You could make things up about why you did badly and say, oh yeah, man, that teacher's no good. But you're not likely to do anything to make yourself do better next time. You're likely to give up, to cheat, to do something easier. That is the fallback of internal uncontrollable attributions. So you ace the test and you have an internal controllable attribution, I worked hard. Your behavior is likely to be that you worked hard again. Even if the work isn't that difficult, if you're diligent, you're always paying attention, you're making sure you learn and produce what the teacher wants, you're getting those good grades, you can still attribute it to your hard work. And so if this happens again and again, you make the same attributions, your behavior is always to work hard again. And repeat that good pattern you've created. And then what happens when you get to high school or to college or to that really hard task? Well, you fail the test. Uh-oh. If your attribution has always been to your hard work, then your natural attribution here is going to be, I didn't work hard enough. I didn't quite realize how hard this was going to be. And what's your behavior? You work harder. And so you turn it around because you think it's something you can control. And this is a really beneficial way to operate in the world in many areas, not just in school. It's a really healthy attribution habit. So Carol Dweck posited this sort of approach as what she called mindset. And what she's really getting at is, do you believe that certain traits are fixed and can't be changed, like intelligence? Like, do you believe that people have a certain level of smartness and that is what it is and they can't really change it? And so she identified two types of mindsets. A fixed mindset, that's the one that people believe where their basic qualities like their intelligence or their talent or athletic ability are just fixed. They're fixed traits, they can't be changed. An individual was born that way, that's all there is to it. And that very much restricts individuals' capacity to develop their potentials. On the other hand, other individuals have a growth mindset. They believe that one's basic traits, like intelligence, are a starting point that can be developed. And all they need to do is work hard. And if they work hard, they can do anything. And that allows them to become resilient and flexible and work up to whatever is asked of them. So you can see here a comparison between these two mindsets. Someone with a growth mindset who fails might recognize it as an opportunity to grow, whereas someone with a fixed mindset might say, that's my limit, I can't go any farther. People with a growth mindset might say, I can learn to do anything I want, compared with a fixed mindset who might say, I'm either good at it or I'm not, as if they have nothing to do about it. A growth mindset might say, challenges help me grow. A fixed mindset might say, I don't like to be challenged. A growth mindset says that my effort and attitude determine my abilities, but a fixed mindset thinks their potential is predetermined. If someone with a growth mindset gets feedback, giving them tips on how to do their work better, they feel grateful. They say, this is constructive, now I can do better. But someone with a fixed mindset would take it personally and maybe feel ashamed or embarrassed. Someone with a growth mindset might say, I like to try new things. I might not be very good at it at first, but I'll give it a whirl. Someone with a fixed mindset, they're not going to be willing to take those chances. I stick to what I know. And lastly, someone with a growth mindset who sees someone else succeed is likely to feel happy for that person and maybe even inspired, whereas someone with a fixed mindset might be kind of jealous. It might make them feel frustrated and competitive with that person instead of appreciating that person's success. So how do we get our mindsets? Well, here we go back to those, in some ways, reinforcers. What are people telling us? And this brings us to this one particular study of Carol Dweck. She has many, many studies like this. I just tend to quote this one because there's a nice little video that goes along with it. And all she did is she worked with 5th grade students, and she had a protocol that she did wherein first she gave all of these students a moderate math test. It wasn't too easy and it wasn't too hard, but reasonably the children could be expected to be successful. Then each student received success feedback. They were randomly assigned to receive one of 3 types of feedback. They might be told, in condition 1, praise for intelligence, you did really well on these problems. You got, whatever their score was, 80% right. You must be really smart. In condition 2, they were praised for effort. Same starting and ending. Wow, you did really well on these problems. You got 80% right. You must have worked really hard. And condition 3, just the control condition, all that means is that nothing was told to the children at all. It doesn't, and they just said, wow, you did really well on these problems. You got 80% right. So this is the setup for the experiment. And then they watched to see what happened next. And so then they gave the students another math test that was much harder. So did those attributions, whether they were told you did well because you're smart, you did well because you worked hard, or nothing at all, did that make a difference on what happened with the second math test? And the last thing the children were asked to do was to write a letter in which they told the scores that they received on that hard math test. And it was framed like this. The researcher said, some children in another state are going to be taking this test also. Can you please write a letter telling them about the test and how well you did on it? And so now we have two dependent variables, two things that we're measuring. First off, we're measuring how well they did on the second math test. Did they give up or did they keep trying? And we can also tell whether they told their scores honestly. Here's a little video that we have to put separately because I can't embed it in this lecture. And the results of the study, right directly from this particular paper, were pretty marked. So let's orient to it first of all. The solid line with the squares means the ones who were told they did well because they were smart. The control condition, they weren't told anything at all, and that's this dotted line with the diamonds. And the ones who were praised for effort said you must have worked really hard. That's this dotted line with the circles. And so what you can see from this is that on the first test, they all did about the same on the easy test. But when it came to the second test, those children who were praised for effort did significantly better than those who were praised for intelligence. In fact, those who were praised told they did well because they were smart on the first test, they gave up and they did poorly on the second test. Furthermore, those students who were praised for their intelligence, told that they did well because they were smart, they were much more likely to lie about their score when they wrote a letter to those children in another state. This is because their mindset had become woven in to who they thought they were, into their identity. And if intelligence was part of who they saw themselves, then to find out that they weren't that intelligent after all because they did poorly on this test, they didn't want to admit that. They felt ashamed of it, and so they lied. Whereas someone who thinks they have some control, they can work harder, they didn't feel a reason to lie. So, in the end here, mindset is another cognitive style that contributes to how we do on challenges or failures. And with a growth mindset, people will increase their effort and strategies because they know if they work hard, they can do it, and they'll have higher achievement. And that in turn will foster their belief in themselves, their belief that they can learn. On the other hand, people with a fixed mindset who believe that intelligence is something that a person is born with that cannot be changed will tend to reduce their effort and withdraw, quit, leading to lower achievement, which in turn reinforces, I'm not that smart. And this becomes the pattern, and this is how mindset